Okay, welcome everyone to the Global Day of Jewish Learning. It's really an honor being a part of this, not just with my wife and I, but with the entire congregation Bet Tefillah in Scottsdale, Arizona. And I must say to the world here that if you ever come to Scottsdale, we will welcome you with open arms. Our community is known not just for its vibrant growth, but also for its warmth. And everyone is welcome. I must start by thanking Josh Lesavoy and the United Web Corporation for opening their offices today. And yeah, we can clap hands, yes, fine. And opening their offices to the world, literally to the world, which is quite a daunting task. But I must say that when Michael Jackson sang "We Are the World," I thought he was kidding. Maybe you did. But the Global Day of Jewish Learning has taught me that he was not kidding, because today we are the world. We are the world connects also well to the topic of this hour, which is the Jewish obsession with community. And it can be seen almost in every realm of our lives. But truly we have this obsession from years gone by with community, with joining ourselves to communities. The subtitle is Why We Cannot Live Alone. So allow me to delve into this topic just a little, and then we'll open it up to questions and answers to anyone in the world, but also to people here in this room, to the members of Congregation Bet Tefillah. So, I'd like to start just with a story that might convey this idea quite well. But there was once a couple who was living in their home. In the middle of the night, they are robbed. And the robber goes straight to the wife and he says, "What is your name?" pointing a gun at her. She says, "My name is Elizabeth." The robber is taken aback and he says, "You know what? Your name is Elizabeth. It must be your lucky day because that's my mother's name. I won't touch you." Then he proceeds to the husband, points a gun in his face and he says, "What is your name?" And the husband is petrified, shaking. He says, "Well, my name is Harry, but they call me Elizabeth." And often the Jewish world has reacted exactly like Harry to communities. We've been individuals, we recognize our individuality, but often we put that aside for the sake of Elizabeth, for the sake of the whole. And the question is why? Why this obsession? And by the way, it is seen truly in all of our texts. From the beginning of times, from the Torah itself, the 5 books of Moses speaks about Moses' last day, in which he spoke to the entire congregation. And he says to them, "Atem nitzavim ayom kulechem," you are standing here all together. And he names the positions that they each hold, the wood choppers, the water drawers, the water carriers. And then he says that it's because of this assembly, this unity, this community, le'ovrecha bivrit Hashem Elokecha, that you can truly connect to God, your Lord. Why? Can I not connect to God, my Lord, without joining hands first with my community? Then we have the famous teaching of Hillel the elder in the Ethics of Our Fathers. It says, "Al tifrosh min hatzibur," do not separate yourself from the community, a famous teaching. We also have Maimonides, who has very harsh words for those who separate themselves from the community. In fact, he says that a person might be a righteous man. He might follow all of the 613 mitzvot. But if he does not connect himself to the community, fast when they fast, rejoice when they rejoice, then he has no portion in the world to come. That's how staunch Maimonides is. Again, it's unfathomable. He has no portion in the world to come, even though he's righteous. Why this obsession to the community? And one last point, as you know, it's truly a hard task to join hands with the community. But it is an imposing one by Judaism. We are asked 3 times a day to join the minyan and pray together with the minyan. We are asked to visit the mourners. We are asked to comfort the sick, bring them some joy. We are always asked to join hands with people that might not just be as connected to us as we think they are. And again, the question is why. So allow me to delve into 3 names that our Torah gives to community, to the word community in general. Unlike in English or in other languages, I believe there's only one or two names. But the Hebrew language has three names for the word community. The first one we encountered yesterday in the portion of Vayishlach. A community often is called a machaneh, right? Which means a camp. Now, a machaneh can relate not just to a camp of human beings, believe it or not, but it can relate also to a camp of animals. A machaneh of sheep, for example. What shared interest do they have? What unites them all together? One word. Fear. Fear. They join hands together because they're afraid of an enemy who might attack them. That's a machaneh. That's why animals often join together. And we saw it, as we said yesterday, when Jacob presents his machaneh, his camp, to Esav, in fear that Esav will attack him. That's one group. Is it one that one should aspire to join? Perhaps not. Because the word machaneh, if you think about it, also means something else in Hebrew. Machaneh can also mean muchneh, which means encampment. Doesn't move. It stops. It camps. Machaneh, muchneh, a relationship as such simply cannot advance. If I am united just because of an enemy, of an external cause, then I'm truly not united. We can be united at that moment. We can be going on outings, to dinner, with friends, and all we talk about is the other, and therefore we united here around dinner. But that's not a unity. That's not a community. That doesn't last. It's muchneh. It stops. It cannot grow. The biblical example for that, if you'll allow me, is Balak and Bilam. Balak, who was the king of Moab, if you remember, was also obsessed with the Jewish people, hated the Jewish people. So he hires Bilam from the nation of the Midianites to go and curse them. Thankfully, I won't tell the whole story, but as you know, thankfully his curses turn into blessings. Thing is this, Balak was the king of Moab, of a nation that despised the Midianites. Why would they unite? Rashi points out, they united in hatred. They united in hatred of the Jewish people. All of a sudden, they're best friends. What happens to that relationship between Balak and Bilam? It destroys itself. It doesn't last. Truly doesn't last more than a few weeks. They become greater haters than they were before. Because when something from the outside, when a negative thing from the outside unites you, it simply is muchneh, it does not last. That's one name. Then we have the name of Edah. In Hebrew, the name Edah is spelled Ayin Dalet Hey, which really is rooted in a separate word. Edah is rooted in the word Yi'ud, destiny. Perhaps also in the word Ed, witness. And this is a community that comes together not because of an external cause, but rather because of an internal one. Something that they are destined to face together. And here I must quote Rabbi Joseph Soloveitchik, one of the great thinkers of this past century, who calls it the Brit HaGoral, which means the covenant that exists between all the Jewish people of destiny. Covenant of destiny. Others put it in different words. They said that this destiny that we all share can be divided into two. There is a fate that we all share, but there is also a faith that we all share. That falls under the same category of Edah, Yi'ud. We all face the same fate. And if the persecutions in our history hasn't shown that, then what will? Hitler didn't differentiate between a pious Jew or non-pious one, between an Orthodox or Reform. We all faced the same fate. We were Jewish, period. Maybe this idea is well conveyed by a trial that we celebrated just a few weeks ago, the trial of Mendel Baylis. You may be familiar with the trial of Mendel Baylis in Russia. But on March 12, 1911, a young Russian man by the name of Andrei Yushensky was murdered in the streets of Kiev. This man was murdered, and a few months after, in July of 1911, a Jew by the name of Mendel Baylis was accused of the murder. Why? Blood libel. In fact, they tried to prove that it must have been a Jew that murdered Andrei Yushensky because he had apparently 13 wounds in his body, 13 stabs. And the number 13 in Judaism is a good number, bar mitzvah, 13 attributes of God, and so on. Later on, they found that there were only 14 wounds, not 13. So it fell in their face, but still, they accused Mendel Baylis. Mendel Baylis demanded a fair trial. He was imprisoned for 2 years. And during that imprisonment, the persecution decided to focus not just on the character of Mendel Baylis, but also on his tradition. And they brought Talmudic texts to prove that the Jewish people see the Gentiles as subhuman. God forbid, chas v'shalom. One of the texts they brought was a Talmudic text that says that Jews should be buried alone in their own cemetery, not with the Gentiles. Why? Because it quotes a verse, the Talmud quotes a verse saying, Atem kuim Adam, you, the Jewish nation, are named Adam, Adam, one whole human being, and the nations of the world are not called Adam. Persecution against Mendel Baylis decided to use this Talmudic text to say, you see, they consider themselves Adam, human beings. The Gentiles for the Jewish people are subhuman. So they decided, the defense team led by Oscar Greenberg, I believe his name was, one of the famed attorneys in Russia. Oscar for sure, Greenberg I might be mistaken. But if you say Greenberg 50% of the time, you get it right with the Jewish people. Or Goldberg. But they decided to consult with the chief rabbi of Moscow. Now, just as a side note, if you go to Jackie Mason's comedies, you should go and approach him and say, it's a pleasure meeting you, Rabbi Yaakov Moshe Maza. Why? Because he was named after his grandfather. That's his real name. Who was his grandfather? The chief rabbi of Moscow, who was consulted during the Baylis trial, Rabbi Yaakov Moshe Maza. And Rabbi Yaakov Moshe Maza was a great thinker and someone who truly knew about the Russian law too. He lived in Moscow, the chief rabbi of Moscow. So he says to them, it's very simple. I can attack that stand of the prosecution. Atem koim Adam. The Talmud says, ye are called Adam, relating to the Jewish people. That is true. Because when one Jew suffers, who do they attack? They attack the entire nation. When one Jew commits a crime, who do they attack? They attack the entire nation. How about the Gentiles? One does a mistake, it's only his mistake. So of course, it is because of you that we are called Adam. It is not us who name ourselves Adam, one full human being, it is you. I remember reading about Rabbi Dr. Lamb, the head of the Yeshiva University, the claimed Yeshiva University, who was apparently on a cruise in 1976 during the raid on Entebbe. And when they heard that the Israeli soldiers were able to rescue almost all of the hostages, he was on the ship. There was a waiter by the name of Mendel on his ship, and Rabbi Lamb says that as soon as the news came out, the people started carrying Mendel on their shoulders, saying, yes, you were triumphant. Mendel, a waiter on a cruise, somehow has some connection with Entebbe? Yes, Atem Kurim Adam. It is this fate that we all share. It is a destiny that unites us. But also we have this faith that unites us. The faith, the traditions that truly belong to each and every one of us. They are an inheritance for every single Jew. And for that, I must quote, perhaps the best way it was ever explained. I must quote the chief rabbi, or the previous chief rabbi of Israel, Rabbi Israel Meir Lau. Himself is a Holocaust survivor. But he tells of a nice story where Socrates landed with Olympic Airlines in Athens, and they opened the door for him, and the Greek man says to Socrates, "Welcome to Athens." Socrates says, "Excuse me, what language are you speaking?" "Greek." "Now I speak Greek, you don't." He says, "Greek? You speak, oh, it's a different Greek? All right." Socrates says, "Are we still a superpower in the world? I mean, an intellectual superpower at least?" The Greek man says, "No, you know, our country is on the verge of bankruptcy, and superpower, not really." So what happened to the temple of Zeus? Is it still here? Can I go and visit it? Greek man says, "Temple of Zeus doesn't exist anymore. The only thing we have is the Greek Orthodox Church, but that belongs to the Christians." Socrates is so upset, he decides to go back to the Olympic Airlines and fly back to heaven. Then you have Julius Caesar boarding the Alitalia flight from heaven to earth, and he lands in Rome. Again, an Italian man opens the door. He says, "Hi, welcome, Mr. Caesar, or Mr. Julius Caesar. How can I help you?" Julius Caesar says, "What language are you speaking?" "Italian." "No, can't be. That's not the language." He says, "Yes, it is. I'm sorry." "Okay," he says, "Fine. Can you show me the Colosseum?" "The Colosseum is in ruins. What do you want from me?" He says, "It's in ruins. Are we still a superpower? Or still governing much of the Middle East and so on?" "Superpower? Italy? Italy has strikes every single day. Scioperos, they call them." He's so upset, he boards back on the Alitalia Airlines and he flies. Moses boards an El Al airplane from heaven to Tel Aviv. He lands in Tel Aviv and he says, "Shalom Aleichem." The Jew that opens the door says, "Aleichem Shalom." "Oh, you speak the same language, wonderful." He says to him, "So, do you still learn Torah?" "Torah, of course. You want to come to our yeshiva, you can learn." He says, "Actually, I don't want to go to yeshiva right now. I want to go to the synagogue. I left my tefillin. I have to wear tefillin today. Can I borrow your pair?" The Jew says, "Of course. Come with me. I'll show you my synagogue." Goes to the synagogue. Moses, he's stunned to find a mezuzah on the doorpost. He kisses it. "That's great. Speak the same language." At the end, he says, "Thank you so much for helping me. May I ask you what your name is?" Man says to Moses, "Yeah, my name is Moses." "Oh, same name? Moshe?" That's how much we have in common. So Moses decides to stay. But indeed, my friends, it is that faith that we all share, that we can all witness, as in the word Edah, that truly unites us. Yet there is a third name for community in Hebrew, which I believe is the most prestigious, the most esteemed of all. That name, as you may know, is Kahal, right? Kahal. We're often called together a Kehillah. That name means an assembly. Now, what's different between an assembly and an Edah is that an assembly is particularly called an assembly because it assembles people of different backgrounds, levels of observances, and so on and so forth. You can stay who you are. Just come together into this assembly. In fact, one of the strongest points in the Torah in which this word is used is this famous verse of Torah Tziva Lanu Moshe Morasha Kehilat Yaakov. The Torah was given to us as an inheritance to the congregation, to the assembly of Jacob. And on that I heard this from my dear Rabbi, the Steinsaltz Midrash that I was not familiar with. But a Midrash about Rabbi Yanai, who apparently was a very, I don't know if there's a word for it in English, in the Hebrew word is Meshupah. He was walking in the street one day. He saw a man that was Meshupah. Rabbi Yanai was walking in the streets of Israel and he sees someone who looks very distinguished. I guess that's the translation. So he says to himself, this man he probably knows a lot of Torah. I can learn a lot from him. I'll invite him to my home. Rabbi Yanai invites this distinguished man to his home, as per the Midrash, sits him down, offers him to eat, and he says, so can you share any words of the Torah with me? The man responds, I do not know any words of the Torah. He says, all right, can you share some words of the Mishnah, of the Agada, something with me? I'm sorry, I don't. At the end of the meal, he says, can you at least bless for me, bless the food? Bless God for the food? He says, I'm sorry, I do not know the blessing. Rabbi Yana is upset. And he says to him, well, then repeat after me. Blessed is the Lord that a dog ate from the dough of Yanai. The man realizes that Yanai called him a dog. He says, well, I have a question for you. Call me a dog? There's one verse that I do know. And that is the verse that Torah tziva lanu Moshe Morasha Kehilat Yaakov. That is the inheritance for the entire assembly of Jacob, no matter who you are. So if I don't know any Torah, it is your turn, Yanai, to teach me. You can't ban me, excommunicate me as a dog. Yanai caught himself. He realizes the mistake he made and he asked for forgiveness. But that, I believe, therefore, is the most important word, the most important name for the word community. Because this name accepts each and every Jew and therefore ties us back to the most essential commandment in the Torah, according to Rabbi Akiva, of loving your fellow as yourself. Because if we do not, then we lose ourselves. If we cannot love our fellow, we cannot be ourselves, as implied by the words of Rabbi Akiva. And indeed, each and every Jew in the world, this world, in our world here, is seen as members of the same body. Some of us may be heads, some of us may be hands, some of us may be legs, some of us may be nails. But just as nails are crucial to a body, so to every Jew is crucial to this entirety of the Jewish body. And therefore, Moses, in the Torah, as we quoted, names all of the different positions. It's great that you're all different, because with your differences, you're able to contribute to the whole, to this keilah. And therefore, with this contribution, you're able to enter into the covenant of God, as Moses tells them. It is our differences that come together that truly makes the nation so unique, as members of the same body. And I have to say that when we look as Jews as such, we look as Jews as shining beauties. Because if I'm able to understand that without the instrument of the other, my symphony is not complete, then I'll also understand the beauty of the other and celebrate it and perhaps even allow it to express itself. That is what makes us so unique, therefore our obsession with community. And I must say that I'd like to juxtapose here between two biblical verses that ask the same psychological question in essence, but they're very different. Moses, when he's called upon God, think about this, to go and lead the Jewish people out of slavery, what does he say to God? He says, I can't speak, I stutter. And he says, Mi anochi, who am I that I should be sent to the Jewish nation? Second question immediately following that is, God, you're telling me to go and save the Jewish people, but they'll ask me what your name is. What should I tell them? What's interesting, God does not answer the first question. He leaves it open. Moses says, Mi anochi, who am I? God's not interested. Moses says, what is your name? God answers. My name is Eheyeh Asher Eheyeh. I will be who I shall be. I will be with the Jewish people in all of their sufferings. Why can't God relate to this first question? Who am I? After all, isn't one of the most important questions in the book of psychology? Who am I? If you do not know who you are, then you really cannot live and fulfill your purpose. Now juxtapose that question with another question. That other question is the first question in the Bible. First question in the Bible is the question of God to man. Not man to God, but God to man. Remember what the question is? Adam and Eve sinned. They ate from the tree, and then they hide. So God appears to Adam and he says, Ayeka, where are you? First question in the Bible. Where are you? Now obviously, although Adam was hiding, God knew where Adam was. The Hasidic commentaries explain famously that that's simply because Adam himself did not know where he was. And therefore God had to ask him, where are you? But listen to this. You have man's question to God, perhaps the most holy man, Moses. Question to God of who am I? God ignores him. Then you have God's question to man, as if God is trying to rephrase the future question of man to God. As if God is trying to say, don't say who am I, but say where am I? Do you know why? The difference is simple. When you ask who am I want to answer that, God says. Because the who am I focuses solely on the self. If you're a man that lives for yourself, you're not a man. The where am I, the rephrasing of God, of the question by God, is man versus his surroundings. Man versus the other. Where is it? God asks that question and he celebrates it. Why? Because we were not created to be alone, to be just for ourselves. To quote Hillel the Elder again, true, if I'm only for myself, who am I then? But we were created for the other, not just for ourselves. Yes, we need to know who we are. It's not an unimportant question. But we also need to know, more importantly, what our surroundings are. Because by knowing our surroundings, we'll know our purpose towards that surrounding. We'll know to become a light to those people awaiting for our light. That is, therefore, the most important question, the only question that God pays attention to. And I'll share with you just a story, and maybe we'll open it up to questions. Let's see what time it is. But a story, and perhaps just another thought. But a story about the Baal Shem Tov, the founder of the Hasidic movement, who was once approached by a man who told the Baal Shem Tov, you know, I heard, famous legend, that if you fast for 40 days, then God allows you to meet Elijah the prophet. Elijah the prophet will reveal himself to you. Baal Shem Tov says, yes, it's true, go ahead, fast for 40 days. The man fasts for 40 days in anticipation for his meeting with Elijah. But on the 40th day, Elijah is nowhere to be found. So he goes to the Baal Shem Tov and he says, you lied to me. How dare you? Baal Shem Tov says, no, I didn't lie to you. You'll see Elijah the prophet very soon. But first you need to do something else besides fasting for 40 days. See, Passover is coming up. I need you to buy 9 cases of food for this poor family in our town. The man says, fine. He goes, buys 9 big cases of food, delivers it to this poor family in their town. The family is, of course, overwhelmed with joy. They didn't know what they were going to do for Passover. They had no food, no meat, no matzah. And yet this man comes with a surprise. They thank him very much. Now he goes back home and he awaits the coming of Elijah the prophet. Elijah the prophet still does not come. The man now is livid. He goes again to the Baal Shem Tov. You lied to me. How dare you? Baal Shem Tov says, no, I did not lie to you. There's just one last thing you need to do. That last thing is that you have to go again to this poor family. This time, don't bring anything. This time, don't even knock on the door. Don't even come in. All I want you to do is stand there by their outside window for a few minutes. And then you'll see Elijah the prophet. The man listens to the orders of the Baal Shem Tov, goes to this poor family, stands by the outside window, and he starts listening to the conversations in the home. And what catches his attention is a conversation between the young boy in the home to his mother. The mother was crying. She says, I do not know what to do. This pious man, this kind man who came to give us the 9 boxes of food was so kind, but now it's all over. We have no food for the remaining days of the holiday. What are we going to do? Then this young boy turns to his mother and says, Mom, don't worry. You were crying before the festival when we had no food. And then Elijah the prophet came over and delivered 9 boxes of food. I'm sure he'll come again. The man then realizes what the Baal Shem Tov truly meant. We may be looking for Elijah the prophets out there. It's not a question of the external uniting us. It's not even a question of that which is greater than us, the faith that unites us. It is the question of what is our responsibility to the other. Not the other responsibility to us, but our responsibility to the other. That makes us so unique, that makes us Elijahs, and makes us holy. And perhaps, therefore, I dare disagree with Steve Jobs. Steve Jobs famously said that his goal in the world is to make a dent in the world, right? Remember that? Said this before. It's a noble goal. But I think the Jewish goal is to realize that we're part of a community and together to shine our individual light, not to make a dent in the world, but to make a dent in people. We have a responsibility towards people. My light joining your light is what creates a flame of warmth in the world. Not joining a stone or an iPad. And therefore the biblical term that is related to Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, King David, King Solomon, so many others, when they passed away, it does not say that they passed away. What it says is that when King David passes away, when Jacob passes away, it says, Vayeasef el amav, that they gathered themselves, Jacob gathered himself, for example, to his people. We say people wind up in the ground, that's wrong. People wind up in people. Vayeasef el amav. This is where our human strength, our Jewish strength lies, in our ability to wind up in others, to hear the call of our responsibility as individuals, join the whole, and make an impact on people and therefore an impact to eternity. And I'll conclude and then I'll open up the questions and answers, but one of my favorite lines is from The Lion King. I don't know if you know, but towards the end of the movie, Simba, remember Simba? The poor lion whose uncle took over his territory. Simba is approached by Mufasa. Mufasa tells Simba, you have forgotten who you are. You have forgotten, therefore, me. Now go back and join the circle of life. Often as Jews, we remain alone for too long and we forget who we are. We forget to join the circle of life. But it is when each and every individual joins the other in creating a kehillah, not just a neidah and a machaneh, that we're able to make something of the circle of life and truly shine our individual light towards the other, so that it touches you, and touches you, and touches him, and touches her. And together, really make the world a whole light of itself and in itself. I'll open it up to questions, both to the world here, from Brazil to Australia, I guess. But
you have a question from North Carolina.
I'll go ahead, North Carolina.
Question from Barry in Greensboro, North Carolina. What about the Goyim? Are they not created in the same image as us? Why is it necessary for them to be separate?
Oh, that's a good question. It's an excellent question. We can speak for another 2 hours. Do we have that, Rabbi Steindl? But I'll say this. First, the topic was the Jewish obsession with community, and therefore emphasize that. But I will say this. I think that just as much as we are individual lights that have the ability to join other lights. I think it's true for the Gentiles. You are right. Well, the name again? Barry. You're right by saying that they too are a part of this world and therefore are a part of this light. And I think that the only way our nations, the Jewish nation and the other nations, can reach their full potential is if a Jew is fully a Jew and a Gentile is fully a Gentile. That, I believe, is the only way, because the Gentile for me is a violin, the Jew may be a piano, and that in itself creates a symphony in the world. True, the Jewish role is different, just as the piano's role is different. But at the end of the day, if we are true to who we are, then we can really contribute to the world with our uniqueness, to the orchestra that we must be playing each and every day. Fine? Yeah.
I think I can extrapolate from what you say that you believe that nationhood, Jewish nationalism, is organic to Judaism,
right,
pre-Zionism. And there's an element in Orthodoxy that rejects that idea.
Go ahead.
So I'd like you to speak to that, and what's your position on it?
So explain. So Devin Spurrier is saying that there's an element in Orthodoxy that rejects the notion of community, as we explained it.
Rejects the notion of Zionism.
Oh, they reject the notion of Zionism.
From your words to me, that Zionism is organic from Judaism, as we are a nation to begin with, and we worry each for the other.
Okay, so the question is how I just have to repeat the question, but it's how there are segments in Orthodox Judaism that reject Zionism, while in essence Zionism is a part of Judaism.
I understand from your words that you perhaps would see Zionism as organic to Judaism, since we're talking about the Jews as a nation going back to the beginning.
Right. Absolutely. Look, I think the key here, and that's again another 2 hours, the key is how do you define Zionism? I think somewhere, every Jew unites with the idea that the land of Israel is an essential part of our essence, so it's an essential part really of our faith. Now the question is what part it plays, what roles do we have vis-a-vis it, and so on. That I think maybe the questions that divide us. But I do agree that Zionism that speaks to this land of Israel, as we just explained, is a unifying force for every Jew, even the most Orthodox ones. Yes, Jeanette.
If by working together we shine our light better, how do we, from different branches of Judaism, work more closely together? How do we not pull each other and compartmentalize each other?
Okay, that's an excellent question. How do we work together in the Jewish community if we each have to bring our own separate light? I think the answer was given to me again by Rabbi Steinsaltz, and that is that he once told me that the difference between a wise man and a fool is very simple. I've said this before, some of you may have heard it, but the wise man makes what is important, and the fool makes what is, the wise man makes what is important, and what is trivial, trivial, and the fool makes what is important, trivial, and what is trivial, important. There are enough important things that unite us that we don't have to fight over the trivial thing. I think that that's part of our mistake, that often as we try and build this building of the Jewish community, not a physical one, but the building of the Jewish community in the world, we jump to the 10th floor before we've even faced the questions of our foundation, the questions that are truly important. We speak about throwing rocks on people who drive on Shabbat instead of speaking about the beauty of rest. That I believe is making the trivial important and important trivial. We have to become wise in order to allow all of the separate lights to join together. Yeah. Joseph.
Go back to what you said about our purpose. I believe it's been said that the most evil man in the world, woman, is one without a purpose. You know, if we go back and we look at the huge individuality, the strength of our leaders with Moses, Abraham, and Isaac, and Maimonides, etc., these were mountains of men.
Right.
Huge individuals, which we can look towards.
Right.
Okay? And transfer our faith and our purpose from those individualities, from those great human beings.
Right.
And so our faith, as Jewish people, is that we have a belief
Right.
from all that has been passed down to us in all of these things.
Right. I agree. What can I say? I agree. No, it's excellent, Joseph. You're right. You're right. I think this, and I think quoting Moses and all of the giants is right, because, you know, part of the problem is that, and that's a small part of the problem, is that we don't have role models to look up to. And maybe this connects well to the global day, because here we have a role model to look up to, speaking in the next hour, Rabbi Dean Steinsaltz, who truly is a mountain of man, to quote you, too. And these mountains of men have always known to really focus on those things that were important. So you're right. Moses lived today, he would have undoubtedly become one of those models. But we need more Moses. Oh, thank you. I'm not going to repeat that. Yes, Scott.
It seems it's almost comical when people say, you know, you put two Jews together, you end up with three opinions or
Right.
expressions on.
Right.
What is it about us that fights the idea of a cohesive community and has such a belief that doesn't lend itself to focusing on the bigger picture, the greater goals, when there's enough people out there who are against us having a strong community?
Right.
Why do we internally have a struggle as well in terms of focusing on that?
Excellent question. Excellent. What is it that divides the Jewish people so strongly when we have enough enemies from the outside? Excellent question. For that, I suggest you read a book by Rabbi Steinsaltz called We Jews. We Jews. But I think there are separate factors that come into play here. And one is the trauma that we have from our history that we carry with us. And therefore, we each had to fight for our own bread, so to speak. That this fighting has been ingrained in us. That might just be a reason. Another reason, I think, is because Judaism is a religion of protest, more than anything. See, Islam is a religion of submission. That's what it means. Christianity, I'll dare say, is more of a religion of obedience. But Judaism is a religion of protest. Now, this protest is against evil in the world. But sometimes we forget what it's against, and we are left just with the protest. But on the other hand, I think it's a beautiful thing that we question everything. That's what makes us survive. That's what makes us reach the highest peaks in life, from the Nobel Prize winners until, God forbid, other realms that are not so positive. But Jews are everywhere, and that questioning, that inherent protest, is what I think gives us this quality. Now, the question is not to eradicate it. The question is how to channel it to the right purposes. I'll tell you this, and then I'll tell you just this. I think there's a beautiful a verse in the Torah that we sometimes overlook, but it really doesn't make sense, apparently. You see, when the Jewish people sinned with the golden calf, God wants to destroy them. And he tells Moses, they're a stiff-necked people. Remember that? Amkshe Oref. So Moses says, no, because they are a stiff-necked people, you should forgive them. But that's why God wants to destroy them. And the answer is simple. What Moses was saying, don't look at this. What Moses was saying to God, don't look at the stiff-necked quality as a negative one. Look at it as a neutral one, and it all depends how you channel it. Because they might be stiff-necked now towards idols. But if you're able to channel that towards you, God, they'll be the most loyal people you've ever had. So I think it's a question of how you channel those inherent qualities of protest and fighting. Yes, Jeremy.
Rabbi, modernity is very distracting. Technology, web, all this stuff that's around us. In my opinion, it's getting more and more difficult to create that community when people have so many choices just every second of the day. How do we work with that?
Well, first we have, so how do we work with modernity? That's the question that Jeremy's asking. So I must say, why not some free advertisement here? But first we have your wife's thelearningshook.com that truly uses modernity to learn, to explore Judaism in the most novel ways. But so we have that. Oh, sorry, thelearningshook.org. Thank you very much. Anything else you want to say? Okay, but so I think the it's a challenge. You're right. That's a challenge. I think those who run away from technology are the ones making a mistake. I think we have the opportunity to face technology not as an enemy but as a friend, because it can truly help us reach as the diverse group of Jews, and not just diverse, but as many Jews as possible than ever before. So we should use it really for, again, it's a question of channeling. The question of channeling. You know, in Christianity, you have 7 cardinal sins. Right? Catholics or by Christians? All right, you have 7 cardinal sins. In Judaism, there aren't any cardinal sins. Envy, that they use as a cardinal sin, is not a cardinal sin in Judaism. Even greed is not. Why? It all depends how you use it. If you envy someone who's spiritual, that's great. If you're greedy about someone who learns Torah and knows unparalleled amount of Torah, why not? So I think many things have to be faced that way. We can't just prohibit things because it's easier to prohibit them. We really have to think how we can use each and everything that we face, including the modern things or the technological things, for our advantage, for our holy and Jewish advantage. Yeah.
Today's a great example.
Right, exactly. Thank you. Today, that's right, Elisa. That today is a great example of using even the Logitech camera to connect hundreds of thousands of Jews together. Amazing. Yeah.
There appears to be a dichotomy within Judaism as far as law versus spirituality. How do you reconcile the two?
So explain. Peter Marcus says that there's a dichotomy between law and spirituality. I'll answer, but I'm not grasping fully what you're saying. But I'll answer this. I'll tell you this. I think. Go ahead. Explain a little bit further.
When I was younger, growing up,
yeah,
Judaism was something that was broke. You do this, that, and it's all laid out for you. Torah was something that you followed.
Rigid.
Yeah, it was very rigid. In studying now as an adult, I'm finding that Judaism is spiritual.
Right.
Very spiritual. And as I get into the depth of it, it's becoming more evident to me that even the legal aspect of Judaism is spiritual.
Right. So that's a good question. So I understand what you're saying now. Peter is saying that as he grew up, Judaism was very rigid and therefore uninviting. But when now you're exploring the spiritual aspect of Judaism, so how do we reconcile the two? Look, I think we reconcile the two by making both of them an integral part of one another. Because a flame cannot exist without wax. I can say to my wife all day long that I love her and be as spiritual about it as possible, but I also have to do something practical about it. She asked me to clean the dishes. If I say no, it doesn't quite coincide with I love you. So I think that's the beauty of Judaism, that it brings this enormous spirituality that Judaism does have to a very practical level, making it a part of us, a part of our world. And therefore they have to come together. Law and divinity, law and spirituality have to come together The spirituality, I shall say, is the flame, is the soul, is the engine, if you wish, and the law is what brings it down to our level, to our world. Is what it is. I would say the expression. Maybe that's the better word. The expression. The law is the expression of the soul. Yeah. Go ahead.
We're speaking about the importance of community and Judaism. And historically, I was raised to be a paranoid Jew. The more successful Jews are at creating a worldwide community and agreeing on things and speaking together, and the more kind of quote unquote powerful we get as a result, the more anti-Semitism grows, because the rest of the world that are non-Jews, for some reason, there's fear involved in that. So how do we grow and create this community worldwide without having to be afraid that one day we're going to be successful and all Jews are going to agree and have a stronger bond and a stronger community without creating a huge rise in anti-Semitism again, which is historically what happens.
Right. So how do we strengthen the Jewish community without imposing fear on the world, fear that might come from this strength? Right? I beg to disagree. I think that the more Jewish we are, the more in sync we are with our Jewish identity, the world might not love us, but they will respect us. And I think psychologically, it makes sense. Psychologists will often tell you that people who are filled with conflicts, it's because they themselves carry internal conflicts. When you're at peace with yourself, you can be at peace with the world. When you respect yourself, the world will respect you. They might not love you, but they'll respect you. I think that's really perhaps the most important thing that Jews have to dedicate themselves to. Rabbi Kook, the first chief rabbi of Israel, Rabbi Avraham Yitzchak Cohen Kook, used to say that if he had the power to add an 11th commandment, out of the 10 he would add an 11th one, it would be do not stutter. Do not stutter. He would tell Jews to stop stuttering. Not be afraid of our calling, not be afraid of our identity, of our traditions, of our heritage. And once we are afraid of that, then we convey fear to the world. But if we respect that in ourselves, then the world will respect us. So I think that really is the only way to deal with that aspect of anti-Semitism. Time for one more. Joseph.
Yes, since I'm here just a short time,
yeah.
And I wanted to find a place I believe I have in Iraq. I've experienced the three factions of Judaism in different circuses in different temples. And I feel there's a conflict. I believe we discussed one incident. And can you tell me why there is a conflict between sometimes jealousy, I don't know, between the three factions, Reform, Conservative, and Orthodox?
That's a good question. So let me relate to the first part. That since you've come to congregation but tefillah, you find this love and this warmth. Well, the only way, you have to come and visit us in order to find that out too. But no, okay, seriously speaking, why is there such division among the Jewish people, particularly among the three major groups, the Orthodox, the Conservative, and the Reform? It's a good question, but to end on a positive note, I'll give you a little parable. And that is that there was once this husband who came to his wife and his children. He said, I have to leave for work, but I'm coming back soon. Can you make me some chicken soup? And the wife and the children said, of course. They made him chicken soup. They brought the chicken soup to the table, to the seat to where he was sitting. He was supposed to come and sit. And they're not waiting for their husband, their father. And they're waiting and waiting. and waiting, and he doesn't come. Day goes by, a month goes by, a year goes by, 50 years go by, he still doesn't come. The children are all grown up. The soup is still on the table, starting to fight. No, our father wanted some salt. He wanted some pepper. Actually, chicken, it's not the right chicken. He wanted turkey. And a century goes by, 10 centuries, the soup is still on the table. And the children are still fighting over the soup. I think all that can be said about this is that it's about time God acknowledges the fact that we still love him. No matter if we think that his soup needs some salt or some pepper. As long as we can be connected to this Torah, to this commandment that he left us before leaving on Mount Sinai, then I think we can celebrate our Jewishness no matter who we are. All right. Thank you.